Chris, you going to get a run in this movie?
Oh, the NFL movie? No, they haven't. Well, I should check my phone, but no, I haven't got the call up as yet.
How's it been? A little bit weird out in the cricket ground today. Just another little thing for the boys to get used to and adapt to, not being on your main deck?
Yeah, but I think I might have spoken to this last week by saying that we're really fortunate not just to have such a world-class ground here, but it's a world-class precinct really, or precinct in the making. So even when we're not on our main ground, it's still pretty good. It's a bit of a suburban feel out there. It was nice.
How close were Tom Stewart and Brian Myers to being house fit, or was that call made a bit early in the afternoon yesterday?
No, Stewart was made probably pre-training yesterday, and it maybe snuck up on us a little bit. Like, he was obviously sore from early in the game against Carlton, and battled on to get through, but just didn't recover as well as we would have liked. And look, it's not a purely precautionary thing, but more and more we are kind of, and I think we have been for a number of years, sort of the way we think about these things is evolving and moving more towards, okay, could this guy play? Maybe that's not the right question. It's should he play in the context of where he's at in his career and where we're at in the season. And like, it's really, we try to avoid situations where we think, oh, Collingwood are on top of the ladder and it's a really big game. With the greatest respect to them, and they deserve it, I'm not sure they're that much better than anyone else. Like, we're in a difficult part of the draw, it seems, but I suspect that means everyone else is as well. So if you start prioritising, let's push him to get up for Collingwood, and then you play GWS the next week, or I don't know who it is, Port Adelaide over in Adelaide, like, they're just trying to prioritise these games doesn't make much sense. So we're just thinking more in terms of what's sort of best for him in the longer term, and having them play less than their best. And that was where he was at last week. Just is more and more seeming counterproductive to us. So Brian Myers is a different situation. I don't really get much feedback, and I don't want it. I think it was, Mac, what day was it? Wednesday? Yep. Yeah. The call came through, he's unavailable. That's it. So I could follow up on the detail, but I don't. So it'll be pretty simple. He'll and again, like, I appreciate that the question often comes, but it's impossible to answer when I get the question, how's he going? Like, he looks fine to me, but what do I know? Like, so I sense again that this is one where it was erring on the side of caution, but we completely support that model.
Yeah, so Tom Stewart, Chris, you talk about the caution. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Is it just this week, or we?
That's my understanding, but again, I'm trying to make it a policy to, like, not elaborate and generalise about things that I really don't have great guidance for. This is, it's like trying to predict way out into the future. Stuff that I'm actually not across. It's just not, I don't see it as a crucial part of my job to be getting hourly updates on the health of our players.
No. Asking you to be Doc Larkins here, but is it a grumbling knee he's dealing with? Can you give us any specifics on that?
Well, I know more than Doc, because I do speak to the people directly who are treating him. So he had a slight injury where he missed a week quite a few weeks ago. Let's say it was about a month ago. And he fell on that same knee again early in the Carlton game. So this is where I now sort of wander out of my area of expertise. But our medical staff say that there's no serious structural damage. This is just one where he was going to be limited, and they expect it to come good pretty quickly. But there would have been times in Tom's career and other players' career as well where I think they would have sort of pushed through this and played poorly, and you get to the end of the month and think, wish we had just chopped him out for a week. Even if you had lost the game, we're starting to think that that's a better way of thinking about these things.
If you had your time again Sunday, would you sub Tom Stewart out after that knee? Obviously he stayed on and had a little bit of an impact, but not as usual. Would you if you had time again, would you be subbing him out?
Yeah, it's a good question. But again, really difficult to answer because, and this is sort of informs the way we think about these things in the future. I think the honest answer is no, because I don't see it as my call. Like, so, with the benefit of hindsight, which we obviously don't have, I would have, but I would never overrule our medical staff. So the feedback comes back, is if he's available, he's right to keep going. Now we don't have a debate about it. We just trust them. So it's an interesting counterfactual, that one. But I guess to expand on the theme that I've been talking about, yeah, I reckon we're moving more towards let's just be proactive and be cautious rather than have guys sort of play on who are clearly limited.
One more on Brian, Chris. Is he back training? Or how much training was he able to do before he was ruled out?
Quite a bit. Yeah, again, so only my observation, and I'm not the sort of coach who is across every single detail. There are sessions that happen. It's not that I'm not aware of them, I'm just not there to observe them all. And all the feedback was that he was going well. So there was some very minor hiccup in there. Check me if I'm not getting any of this right. That meant that he was unavailable this week. But say yesterday, for example, he was out there for our whole session. He's done some controlled contact. They're sort of my observations. So, and I am sort of giving a bit more information than I normally would, just to be clear that there's nothing nefarious here. It's just a conservative call made by the people who make those calls.
I assume you don't play a huge part in the injury lists that come out each week, but was there a reason why Tom Stewart was left off on Tuesday and then is ruled out on Thursday?
Injury? Yeah, you're right. I don't even know. I don't even know that we release an injury list. Yeah, unless is there a conspiracy theory? Is there something going on in the shadows that I'm not aware of, you people? No. But I think likely, if I can speculate, is that we thought he'd be okay.
Yeah.
Chris, is Jack Henry not tracked as you expected with that hamstring?
Oh, well, as opposed to these people that say hamstrings are 21 days, every situation's different and difficult to predict. We were hoping that he might be available this week, but realistic that might not happen as well. So there's a pretty wide spectrum here. So again, you asked for specifics, and we could lie and say it's going to be 3.5 weeks, or we could tell you the truth and say we're optimistic that it could be 2.5, but hey, it might be 5. We don't know. But no, I haven't. There's no issue that I'm aware of that's sort of changed things. But again, I think you can the takeaway should be if we're umming and ahhing a little bit, we'll take an extra week. That's kind of where we're at with almost all of these things.
Mitch taking this opportunity, you said it would come and it has come out. Is it because of Tom, or will you found a spot for him this week?
No, I reckon we would have found a spot for him anyway. And there's a little bit of the pre-planning. As you know, we're not huge believers in the 6-day break. We came off Brisbane, I think, with 2 6-day breaks in a row. I think Gather Round was in there as well, wasn't it? And played really well in those games, Adelaide and whatever the other one was. Was that? Anyway, I'm getting it wrong. But having said that there has been a little bit of thought given to how we were going to use Mitch through this period. So it was sort of, at least in the back of our minds, that this was a possibility. And the Stewart thing probably helped it a little bit, but I suspect we would have done it anyway.
How close is George Stevens to a debut? Obviously, he was pulled out of the VFL last week, and the clearance area has been an area that other sides have got on top of you in the last couple of games, and that's sort of just one of his strengths. How close is he to a debut?
Yeah, close. It's always a good indication when the carryover, because it means if something happens, we'd be happy for him to play. So yeah, he's in the squad again and right in the frame. So he's doing a good job, George.
And Ollie Henry was the move to the stud. Do you feel the move, obviously the Danny Field move forward it's worked wonders. But do you feel he has been a bit of a casualty of that move, considering the roles they play?
It depends how you look at it. If you look at it in purely, and I think a little bit simplistic terms, maybe he hasn't been targeted as much down there. And we're looking to change that a little bit, to be honest, because that hasn't been by design. And there's some things evolve that are, not intentional. I think that is one way of looking at it. Now, we don't think Ollie, needs to be our main focal target inside 50 for him to play well, but we would like to direct the ball through him a little bit more. So, we've talked about making that adjustment.
So will he be in the 22 this week?
Good question. Yeah, good question. I don't answer that generally. Maybe. He'd be in the 23. Yeah.
Just on Collingwood, I mean, obviously they've started the season quite strongly. Where do you feel like their strengths lie as a side?
Like all the teams that are towards the top end of the ladder these days, you can't have too many flaws. So it's sort of easy to highlight, their strengths. But I think more to the point now, like you can be, if you're really, really strong in one area, and I'm not going to name them, but I can think of a few teams that are really strong in one area, but maybe because of their evolution in their list build, they're quite weak in another. And that makes them really vulnerable. Whereas the good teams, it's like good attack, good defence, good contest, like good system. That's more the way I look at Collingwood. So I get it that the midfielders, that's the nature of our game. Even the Coaches Association, we're the same. Like, I think we're a bit critical that it's a midfielders award, but we keep voting for midfielders. They get the plaudits, but I think at both ends, and their collective has been really solid. Their experienced players are playing well, and I just find myself continually, like, not only saying it publicly but thinking about it. It's when you're trying to assess where the competition is, timing's as important as anything. Like if you run into a team with good availability, their best players in form, any team's going to be hard to beat. And sometimes you fluke it that you just get a week where a team's a bit off, or some of the best players are either out, or a bit like Stewart last week, a bit underdone, and you can fluke it a bit. I think Collingwood are going through a patch where they're things are going well for them. So I wouldn't isolate it just to Dacos going well in the middle, or Pendlebury side bottom sort of at the peak of their powers in their mid-30s. It's broader than that.
Is there a key area you need to tidy up in time for tomorrow night?
After the one loss?
Yeah, or just something that popped up in review. Yeah,
from the
certainly not a trend, but
yeah. Even the teams that are winning most weeks, would see trends that they're not happy with, and that's, again, it's the nature of the competition. So yes, clearly there are, but again, I don't really expand on these things too much. But we feel like we've had a good week off the back of the way we allowed the game to be played against Carlton, and so again, I don't go into any detail there, but yeah, everyone is really disappointed when you lose. But it's funny, you can get a little bit of a pep in your step later the following week, because you think, if that didn't happen, maybe we would have been a little more passive on trying to adjust for the next game. So yeah, we think that we're better prepared for the loss, if that makes sense. I don't think that does make sense, but you know what I mean. Is that what you're after? Something like that. Yeah. You didn't have a specific.
No. Last one, can there be a bit of a pressure hangover in footy at the moment? When you've been up and applying that manic pressure at a level for 3 or 4 weeks, just naturally that you don't realise it's happening, but there's a bit of a drop, and then you can get opened up a bit?
Yeah, my guess is it's going to happen across the season to most teams, and my observation post-game was it's as bad as we've played last week for a long, long time, certainly this year. And we've had patches within games. Even we beat Freo by a decent margin round 1, but we had a patch in the third quarter where we were poor. And the draw's really quirky too. I think there's going to be, to my observation, Brisbane were off when they played Collingwood a couple of weeks ago, off a 5-day break. And, there are just going to be reasons why there's going to be sort of ebbs and flows. And like even the fatigue that comes with, so-called big games. Like I don't tend to buy into it as a rule. But again, I can't argue with anyone that says there's a bit of a physical and mental letdown from 90,000 people at the MCG Easter Monday, say compared to a game in front of a small crowd in a sort of non-traditional stadium. I think all those things are real, and the way you play, I wouldn't be losing sleep if I were any team, in particular at round 7. Like the challenge in today's competition will be maintaining your level throughout the season so you finish high enough, and then finding a way to play your best footy when it counts. And it's incredibly difficult. Good to watch, I suspect, because it's much more unpredictable. But yeah, the AFL have done a great job of making our life difficult in that respect, but good for the game.
How do you, as a coach, how do you try to maintain that consistency amongst the group each week, especially when you look at the fluctuations in games, 666 rule, it makes it tougher than ever?
Yeah, it's complicated, and one of the challenging parts is that it's not the same for everyone. Like, you can fall into the trap of thinking this is where our team's at, when really we've got 45 players on our list, and we've got different guys sort of in different spots within their periodisation. And so I think it is sort of taking a step back and try to sort of dig in a bit deeper rather than sort of making really broad, blunt assessments on, well, all of a sudden now we're a poor defensive team off the back of one bad game. It's more nuanced than that, and it takes a bit of work. But I think there's also the understanding that you won't be perfect, and if your expectation is that you're perfectly consistent across the year, then you're going to be disappointed.
Chris, how do you treat your non-playing players this week? And I talk about the guys that are close, and George Stevens has been referenced, but Jake Colajazzi needs some footy under him. Jed Hughes is obviously going to get back to footy next week. Is there a fairly decent session for them coming? Yeah,
there is. And it's a good point you bring up, because it's another example of the quirks that you need to deal with. I don't think anyone's sort of sitting back thinking that the second-tier competition is ideal at the moment. I know Ross made some comments about, there are more sort of quirks in the game that make the management of your season difficult. So the number of buys in the season, but you've got to roll with the punches a bit. There are some guys where we think it's actually optimal for them not to play this week, and we can get more training into them, and that's good. And there's another, Collajazzi is a good example. We'd love him to get the chance to get more match practice in again this week. But the one thing I will say is it's not as if we don't see the schedule and have time to plan for it. If these things sneak up on us, it's on us. Did you ask a question?
Just one more. Just on the defensive element of the game, you mentioned before, you guys were second ranked without footy last year. It slipped a little bit this year. How do you look to try to go back to that game that got you so far last year in defending opposition ball movement?
Do you just mean in terms of scores against?
Not just scores against, just like in terms of like D50 to inside 50, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I'd need you to be more specific, because I think these things are a bit broad sometimes in the assessment, and especially...
Maybe in particular just like forward up intercepts where you guys have slipped a bit from last year. I know we're getting a little bit, but...
And it's interesting how you look at that, because I do rate teams that do that. I'd kind of make the case that forward half intercepts are an offensive thing as much as a defensive thing. But again, I'm not evading the question, but I think like at round 7 or whatever we are, it's just too small a sample, and the scoring early in the year is different to where it ends up, in the depths of winter. And even I think, I can't remember the exact number, but maybe Adelaide kicked 70 or 80 points against us in a half over in Gather Round. And they were just so hot at that stage, kind of offensively. And I'm pretty sure we were right in that assessment. Now our second half was good. They only kicked 100 points for the game. But then was in the next week or two that two of the best offensive teams in the competition in GWS and Adelaide in pretty good conditions at the Adelaide Oval kicked 50 and 30 points respectively. It's like these things do ebb and flow. So again, back to my point, we prefer not to look at it and say and these things are so at the margin. You can improve a little bit and go from fourth in the comp to, you know, to first overnight. But you picked up on something I said. I probably gave up more than I would have liked. We thought defensively we should have been stronger against Carlton, and so what better team to test ourselves against the attacking power of Collingwood?
What are your frustrations with the VFL? Brad was big on this too, or said work needs to be done.
So I'm really careful of sort of elaborating on something I haven't heard. I don't know. So my point, I think largely, and I could get this wrong, airing my ignorance a little bit. Are there 22 teams in the 21? Yeah. Does anyone think that's optimal? I'd be surprised. And again, these observations shouldn't be interpreted as criticisms. Because generally when something's, and I've said this about the AFL before, generally when we look at things that just makes no sense. The takeaway from that should be it's difficult to fix. And it's like our fixture. No one would start a competition and say, let's have 23 rounds and 18 teams and blockbusters that you have to, like there's complications in there. And the VFL system is a bit the same. So there's the fixture and the difficulty in marrying up your VFL team's fixture with your senior team's fixture. And we see that with carryovers all the time. So again, easy problem to identify, difficult one to fix. But when your AFL team's playing on Saturday and your VFL team's playing on Sunday, it's really hard to manage because you either, you know, take a risk and don't hold any guys over, or you get an injury in the warm-up and you have to play one short. So those sort of things are a challenge. The number of buys in there are a challenge. I think, like Ross's comment about the suspension with all the buys in there, they're just, and maybe it was hard to foresee those challenges, but they should be rectified pretty quickly.
But again, AFL returns to be a better model, and then the Carlton League.
Yeah, I'm happy to stop whenever you like. I'm kind of waffling on a bit now, but it's a good conversation to have. I can't give you a really well-informed, educated view in the time frame we've got, but the short answer is yes. But there are so many factors that go into it, and cost is one of them. But I don't think we sort of sit around strategising this stuff much, do we? No. We'll be pretty strong on the things that we think should be fixed, but again, I think we're pretty capable of coming up with the problems with that second tier competition. Not very good at coming up with many solutions. Yeah, but I think there's been a couple of examples, just in the game recently where it does make a bit of sense to say, okay, if you see something that's clear, it's okay to act pretty quickly, rather than saying our hands are tied, we've got to wait until the end of the year before a guy we want to get 4 weeks ends up getting 6 weeks. Like, you can fix that pretty quickly, I reckon. But that's only my opinion.